In planning for this unit, several factors were taken into consideration. We had just finished a unit on reaction rates and solutions, in which this unit on thermodynamics flowed easily into because it focused on energy of reactions. Students exhibited about 70% achievement of conceptual ideas from these past units in on their exit slips. However, they did struggle with the mathematical portion of the content. And so I decided to really focus on honing their math skills for this unit on thermodynamics. I also realized that students were having a very difficult time organizing all of the information that they were learning due to the short 4 months that they had to learn 1 year's worth of chemistry. So I try to make this unit more cohesive by pushing the essential question of the unit: how do chemical reactions in the factories of Huntington Park cause thermal pollution? The unit is then based around this essential question. This unit covers 4 learning targets of thermo, 3 of which are concepts on heat and temperature, and the 4th is using these concepts to calculate quantitative data. These learning targets are linked to CST Chemistry Core Standards 8A through 8D. We have also seen some of these concepts before, so I utilized brain bubbles in my lessons to push students to access prior knowledge and apply it to the current content. So you see that here artifacts are included in the binder. I noticed that 80% of the students were more engaged with these brain bubbles because they like to be able to show what they have learned, or just the fact that they were questions that they couldn't answer. I also implemented model cars in this unit to further help students with solving for heat capacity. I noted that only 40% students really understood how to solve these math problems, which was also reasonable, or not reasonable, but understood based on their low math CST scores, which many of them scored far below basic or below basic. This math component was used in conjunction with the active practice tic-tac-toe worksheet, which is also included in the artifacts. I can confidently say that 100% of students were engaged in doing this active practice, so about 37 out of 37. And I also observed the lower performing or mid-performing students teaching the lower performing students the content. The lessons of this unit were structured more than those in the past, with the classic math lesson plan of hook, IBE, interactive mini lecture, active practice, and occasionally exit slips. I observed Dorothy Rodriguez implement this structure in a very transparent and routine way that the students really responded to, so I decided to more concretely add this into my block plan. In order to make a more cohesive unit, deductive structured notes in the form of concept maps were used so that they could see how all of the information they were learning were actually part of one outline or mind map that I also show the students. Mind map is included in the binder. Marzano cites that using graphic organizers is an effective way to further learning for achievement by combining linguistic and non-linguistic learning. In my ELL focus students, I also noticed an improvement about out of the 10 students, about 6 to 7 of them were taking more notes and more detailed notes. However, still some did not have complete notes. In the beginning of the unit, I realized that students may already have some knowledge of the content. We access this knowledge in the form of a catalyst as well as the brain bubbles, as a form of formative assessment, so I could see how much they know. Vaca and Vaca cite accessing prior knowledge as an important step to allowing student achievement. Throughout the lesson, I conducted formative assessments, usually 3-2-1 in JTPS, to gauge the depth of student understanding. In the video, you see artifacts of students using analogies in their defense of learning via JTPS for one of the lessons. This math technique was cited in class as a method to gain data to modify direction and pacing of the lesson. As we move through the unit, students practice content in class and in homework, as Marzano highlights that practice is essential to student achievement. Focusing on the last learning target, 40% of students showed struggle at the end of the lesson on Wednesday, so I use model cards included in the binder to do a reteach the following day. So the block plan was extended another day. As Marzano cites, more practice ensures a more thorough understanding. 80% of students were engaged in creating the model cards. My ELL, low performing, and SPED students heavily relied on this during their tic-tac-toe board problem, which the artifact is also included here, and their work is also included. In the next year, I would start with creating a model card for every mathematical learning target, and then do an active practice that is more framed as a game, because I saw that really worked with my students. They showed about 90% mastery of the learning target, so I moved on to the new learning target of the lesson. The new lesson started with a student demo as a hook, in which the students had to explain a common phenomenon demonstrated in the demo with complete sentences in a chemistry perspective. I then had the students move into an IBE to explain phase changes, and I noted that lessons at the beginning of the unit began better in terms of engagement when I used an interesting hook and followed it up with a more content-related IEBE, so I continued that throughout my unit. I also noted that in an observation of Dorothy Rodriguez. I saw that 80% of students were more engaged when they saw something familiar, such as in the IBE. We then did, that's what I'm noting here, we then did some interactive mini lecture, and their practice was to return to the IBE to fill out the cycle with the new scientific language that they learned. I decided to cut the lesson in the second portion of Friday short in closed class with an exit slip that only covered calculations and phases, which 80% of the students were able to answer successfully, and this formative assessment is also included. Due to time restrictions, I made the decision to exclude teaching calculations of heat, of formation, and vaporization, and only cover their meanings in order to allow for more time for an understanding of the material we were able to cover, such as a reteach of the specific heat calculations. In future block plans of this unit, I think that I will have to seriously consider again whether or not to teach these calculations. If there's enough time, then we will cover them. Otherwise, I found that spending more time thoroughly teaching specific heat was more valuable and increased mastery significantly to make it worthwhile. I decided to make model cards instead to differentiate for the higher performing students on the calculations that we were not able to cover, so that they could use it independently to master the material for the periodic assessment. Before the summative assessment, I utilized stations to review the content, and I observed that 80% engagement of the material at each station, and the students were heterogeneously grouped. Before we could do stations, we had to go over one more learning target in the same day. If given more time next year, I would adjust this in my block plan by allotting a whole day to review without including new material. On the summative assessment, I saw that 70% of students achieved 100% on learning target 4, which shows me that active practice and model cards were significant in this achievement, because their previous understandings of math formulas was very poor, again as evidenced on previous unit exams and their math CST scores from middle school. For the other 3 learning targets, I've designated 60% as mastery, 2 out of 3 questions correct. The summative assessment is included. Students on average scored, as an artifact, students on average scored 60% on the first and second learning target, but only 30 on the third learning target. This may have been a result of learning it on the day of the review. which will be revised for next year's block plan. The summative assessments, error analysis, and reflections are attached, which directed and drove my reflections and adjustments for next year's block plan.